Well, good evening, everyone. You're listening to Red Pill 78. I am the Corruption Detector, and this is your Red Pill News. I hope everyone's having a lovely day and that you had a marvelous evening yesterday as well. Had to take the day off because I had to care for my sick pup. He's looking good. There's a couple of complications, but I think in the end, it's all going to pan out. Well, first of all, today we're going to be talking about former Ambassador Susan Rice. She claimed to know absolutely nothing about the Spygate scandal. She had no knowledge, apparently, that President Trump and the people in his orbit, like Michael Flynn and his children, had been listened to or unmasked. Well, it has now come out that is absolutely, completely false. We had that declassified email, and then there was additional information declassified yesterday, and today she has admitted that she was directed to write that email at the behest of the White House. Now, we're also going to be talking about the recently released tapes, which show Joe Biden and John Kerry speaking with the former Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko, talking about corruption and how best to handle it so President Trump doesn't find out. Now, the Democrats are in a panic because probably as a result of those calls being released, the Senate Homeland Security Committee has approved a probe into Hunter Biden and the Burisma Ukraine scandal. We're going to be talking about that. Also, Secretary Pompeo took the media and Senator Bob Menendez to task, stating that he doesn't get his ethics guidance from a man who was criminally prosecuted. We're going to talk about some of those charges. And finally, Mika Karen Brzezinski went ape on President Donald Trump today on MSNBC, calling for Twitter to ban him. Why? Because President Trump continues to draw attention to the fact that Lori Klausutis was deleted in the office of Psycho Joe Scarborough. All right, guys, we're going to go over all of this and more, so please, everyone, do sit back, relax, grab your popcorn, and we'll be right back after a brief word from our sponsor. During a worldwide pandemic, it's a good idea to stock up your house with essential supplies. If the lights go out, it's really important to have contingency plans in place. A good start would be a flashlight, and not just any flashlight, but the Fighter Flare flashlight. The 6-in-1 Fighter Flare comes with a 3,000 milliamp hour solar-powered recharging battery, 800 lumen LED, high and low beam lights, emergency strobe light, compass, wire and rope cutter, emergency glass breaking hammer, and a high-powered military magnet. Users have reported this flashlight to be an all-in-one lifesaver and wouldn't go anywhere without it. It's lightweight but very durable, compact but great for handling all emergencies. The Fighter Flare flashlight is the perfect addition to your household and can be very reliable in times of need. Supplies are limited, and this is your very last chance to get 20% off on the new 2020 model before they sell out. Take advantage now and give you and your family the gift of night protection. Please visit www.fighterflare.com. And remember, when you support my sponsors, you support this channel. All right, guys, thanks for sticking around. First of all, today we're going to be talking about Susan Rice. Susan Rice with this hot take right here, famously claiming that she had no knowledge of Obamagate or Spygate or any of the spying that was done on President Trump and his team or Mike Flynn. So sadly for the conspirators, this video exists in eternity on the internet. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
During the transition after President Trump had been elected, that he and the people around him may have been caught up in surveillance of foreign individuals and that their identities may have been disclosed. Do you know anything about this?
I know nothing about this. I was surprised to see reports from Chairman Yunus on that count today.
Absolutely shocked. She knew nothing about it. But wait a second, what about that infamous email she wrote about how President Obama wanted them to do everything by the book? Oh, that's right. Here it is. This was a declassified email that Susan Rice wrote to herself documenting that infamous Oval Office meeting on January 5th, 2017, which was definitely before she claimed to have known nothing about what was taking place. Now, remember, she wanted to just make a note telling herself that everything was done by the book and President Obama wanted to make sure that it was done lawfully. But this part right here, this is the recently declassified new portion of the email. And it states, Director Comey affirmed that he is proceeding by the book as it relates to law enforcement. From a national security perspective, Comey said he does have some concerns that incoming incoming NSA Flynn is speaking frequently with Russian Ambassador Kislyak. Comey said that could be an issue as it relates to sharing sensitive information. President Obama asked if Comey was saying that the NSC should not pass sensitive information related to Russia to Flynn. Comey replied, potentially. He added that he has no indication thus far that Flynn has passed classified information to Kislyak, but he noted that the level of communication is unusual. Now, this email right here, which Susan Rice immortalized forever, clearly shows that they all knew exactly what was going on. Now, we had another famous hot take very recently when Joe Biden claimed that he knew nothing about it either, but then he was reminded that this meeting, of course, took place, and then he had to take it back and say, oh yeah, that's right, I knew it was happening, but that's it. Well, then later we found that Joe Biden was one of the people who actually unmasked Flynn's name. So clearly he had a much deeper role than he wanted to admit before as well. Now, we've always wondered just why did Susan Rice write this email? It didn't make any sense. She was obviously trying to cover her rear end and trying to cover the rear end of anybody who was at that meeting, but we now have an answer. And that's right, Susan Rice's team has confirmed that she was directed by White House counsel to write that infamous January 20th, 2017 email about the secret Oval Office meeting. Now, Susan Rice, the former National Security Advisor, sent this email to herself on the 20th, memorializing the email so that everybody would know that everything was done by the book. Who did we have in attendance? We had Barack, we had Joe Biden, we had Sally Yates, Jim Comey, Susan Rice, John Brennan, and James Clapper, all of the heavy hitters in the Spygate scandal. And they were discussing the phony Russia dossier and General Flynn's phone call with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. Now, one thing that's very important to note is that there was no FISA in place when General Flynn's phone calls were being listened into. So that could mean it was the clowns in America doing the listening, or it could mean that the Five Eyes partners were doing the listening and then passing the information on. But in the end, why would they have a need to listen to General Flynn? Well, now that we also know that there was a Treasury Department person who came forward to say that General Flynn's and President Trump's children's financial information was being unmasked and taking a look at, it would seem that there was a long-running operation to follow, watch, and listen to General Flynn and the people in President Trump's orbit. Now, acting DNI Grinnell declassifying that email yesterday and releasing it to the public is big news, and the newly declassified portion of the email once again implicates Barack and Jim. In that meeting, obviously, they were discussing Flynn's communications with Kislyak, and several times throughout the email, Susan Rice made the point to say by the book, a very, very strange way to put it, unless she was specifically trying to make sure that if this information came up in the future, then she could look back at it and say, look, we did it by the book, and Barry asked me to do it by the book. Now, Rice even wrote that Comey affirmed that he was proceeding by the book as well as it relates to law enforcement. I suppose there is no other way that Jim Comey could do this, considering the fact that Jim Comey was the head of the FBI, which is the nation's premier law enforcement agency. I don't know why she needed to put in there as it relates to law enforcement. I mean, what other way could it relate to? Now, former U.S. Attorney Brett Tolman spoke out about the Susan Rice email to herself in a series of tweets, and he showed that Rice's efforts were to not only cover her and Obama's behinds, but they were to cover everyone's behinds, as she included all of those people in the meeting, stating over and over again, by the book, by the book. Now today it has come out that Susan Rice's email was written because it was requested by the White House counsel. Now, Fox News reporter Gillian Turner said Susan Rice's team confirmed to them at Fox News that it was the White House counsel that demanded she write that email, and there is no other reason to do it except that they were worried that at some point in the future this information would become public. Now that it's become public, it doesn't matter that they stated it was going to be done by the book or that it was being done by the book. All we need to do is look at the evidence laid out clearly in front of us, and we know that there was nothing legal about this investigation into General Flynn and the people inside President Trump's orbit. They had no reason to believe at any time that President Trump or anybody that was working with him were communicating with the Russians for the purposes of passing confidential or classified information. The only reason they did this was because they were afraid that President Trump and his team would discover the massive corruption taking place. And that is exactly what is happening right now. And it's not just here in America. the Ukrainians are getting in on the act as well, because yesterday leaked tapes reportedly showing Biden pressuring the president of the Ukraine to fire the prosecutor in exchange for this $1 billion came out. Not only Biden and Poroshenko, but former Secretary of State John Kerry is included in on the action as well. Now, it was a Ukrainian lawmaker with ties to the Russian KGB, as reported in the Daily Caller, who actually released the phone calls that were made between Vice President Biden and former President Petro Poroshenko. And this is back in 2016, discussing that infamous $1 billion in loan guarantees, which would only be given to Ukraine if they agreed to fire Viktor Shokin. The lawmaker who released the information is Andrei Durkok, and he said during a press conference on Tuesday that Petro Poroshenko recorded his calls with Biden and that he received the tapes from investigative journalists. So who knows how long these have been floating around. Now, the full context of the conversations between these guys was edited out, but the Washington Post reported that there were portions that were released, and they're mostly consistent with how Biden has publicly characterized his efforts to get Viktor Shokin fired at that time. Now, Biden's spokesperson Andrew Bates told the Post that the release of the tapes was yet another instance of Russia's efforts to hurt Biden. Why would Russia want to hurt Biden? It seems to me that a weak leader in power in the United States is better for Russia than anything else. He also claimed that the tapes were heavily edited, and he called them a nothing burger. Now, Biden boasted back in 2018 on stage, on camera, about how he had Viktor Shokin fired over the guarantees of the loans. And it's worth noting that even though Biden claimed that Viktor Shokin was corrupt, there was absolutely no evidence of that wrongdoing. However, there was evidence that Viktor Shokin and his team were investigating Hunter Biden, Devon Archer, and the whole scandal taking place with Burisma. Now, in the calls, Petro Poroshenko says, "Yesterday, I met with General Prosecutor Shokin, and despite of the fact that we didn't have any corruption charges, we don't have any information about him doing something wrong, I especially asked him to resign." Now, it's very important that Petro Poroshenko himself noted on the tape that there was no evidence of wrongdoing on behalf of Viktor Shokin. Now, unfortunately, the tapes released yesterday don't specifically mention Hunter Biden or Burisma Holdings, but at that time, we know that Shokin was investigating wrongdoing at Burisma that occurred before and during the time that Hunter Biden served on that board. Now, it doesn't matter that the tapes were segmented, it doesn't matter that they weren't released in full. I'm sure that that will come with time, but the important thing is that the tapes have been released at all. We know that Viktor Shokin was doing nothing wrong. There is no evidence of corruption. He was the one investigating corruption. We know that Hunter Biden was on the board of Burisma. We know that Joe Biden pressured for Viktor Shokin to be fired. And we know that the Obama White House was deeply concerned with Hunter Biden's involvement in Ukraine during this time in history, because there was a massive amount of corruption taking place. There was also billions of dollars in U.S. aid that went missing. The list goes on and on. And because we have that treaty with the Ukraine in order to help them with prosecutions and investigating crimes, I think this mushroom cloud is going to continue to expand. And now today we have an update from the Senate Homeland Security Committee. And that update is that the Senate Homeland Security Panel has approved a Hunter Biden probe, and they are sending out subpoenas. That means they are compelling people to come in and testify. Now, I have to believe that there is no coincidence when it comes to the release of those tapes. And now today, this investigation has been announced. But the Democrats are certainly panicking because the very fact this investigation exists raises the possibility that the entire scandal is going to blow wide open. As I said, we know that there was massive corruption taking place, and the only question left is who knew what and when, and also who got paid. Now, Senate Republicans approved the subpoenas in their investigation of Hunter Biden and Burisma just this morning. And I have to believe that there has to be a connection between those calls that were released yesterday. Now, the chairman of the Senate Homeland Security Committee, that would be Ron Johnson, a Republican of Wisconsin, went on Fox News to discuss the investigation and give us a little bit of an update. He said, "I'm somewhat suspicious. My interest level has been raised by the high level of their objections. I think they protest a little too much. Apparently we're hitting a nerve. Maybe we're getting close to finding out some important information." I definitely believe that they are very close to finding out some important information. Those who scream the loudest obviously have the most to hide. Now, one of those people who are yelling the loudest is Senator Kamala Harris right here. She had some choice words for Senator Johnson. Let's go ahead and take a listen to this clip.
Members of this committee, I urge you to vote against this political sideshow so that we can focus our attention on the pandemic that is threatening the lives and livelihood of the American people.
So Senator Johnson wants to call in Blue Star Strategies. Blue Star Strategies is a Democratic-led PR firm. And the reason he's calling in Blue Star Strategies is because they had previously attempted to call in Andrei Telizhenko from Ukraine to get some answers directly from him. But the Democrats balked at that. So they said, why don't you go ahead and call in Blue Star Strategies? And that's exactly what Johnson has done. And now people like Kamala Harris and others are up in arms stating that if we don't get to other business, things that are facing the American people, then the country is going to be in a much worse position than it is already. Unfortunately, we've spent the last 4 years not paying attention to what the American people need. I don't understand why suddenly Kamala Harris is so interested in the best welfare of the American people. Sounds to me like she is hiding something, and Senator Johnson feels the same.
That panel authorized a subpoena along party lines, that vote, for a U.S. firm which represented Ukrainian energy company Burisma while Joe Biden was vice president, and his son Hunter Biden sat on Burisma's board of directors. This is part of a larger investigation into potential conflicts of interest during the Obama administration.
And then when it comes down to subpoena and Blue Star, all of a sudden they object and they kind of throw a little bit of a hissy fit there. But, trust me, this was not something, I didn't want to make this a big deal. I just wanted to get the information. I just wanted to get those records. We'll get those records now and we'll see if we find something. I'm somewhat suspicious. My interest level has been raised by the high level of their objections. I think they protest a little bit too much. I don't know. Apparently we're hitting a nerve here. Maybe we're getting close to finding out some important information.
Interesting.
So just what is it that the Democrats are so worried is going to be found by the investigation of Blue Star Strategies, by the investigation of Hunter Biden, and the investigation of Burisma and the Ukraine? Well, if you think back, essentially during the 8 years of the Obama administration, it was an unmitigated free-for-all of corruption and deceptive and duplicitous actions being taken by virtually everyone in the administration and certainly by many, many Democrats. And it's not just Ukraine. I think that this investigation is going to lead to corruption in other areas as well, because the playbook in the Ukraine was a duplicate of playbooks being used in other countries. We know they love to use relief agencies. They love to use the taxpayer dollars that are supposed to go to helping other countries to funnel off and siphon into their own bank accounts. We know the corruption is widespread, but you have to wonder just how widespread it is. I, for one, am certainly looking forward to seeing what Senator Johnson and his committee can pull up about Blue Star Strategies, and then, by proxy, the corruption taking place in the rest of the world. All right, now next, Secretary Pompeo took the media and Senator Bob Menendez to task earlier today during a press conference. Now, he was responding to the New Jersey Democrats' recent attacks about the firing of the State Department Inspector General Steve Linick. Pompeo said today he had no idea that Linick was investigating the Trump administration's arms deals with Saudi Arabia, but he said, "I don't get my ethics from a man who was criminally prosecuted." Now, he called up one case in particular, and that was for bribery, but Senator Bob Menendez is well known for additional cases that he was involved in. Now, in that case in 2017, where he went on trial for bribery, he faced a dozen criminal charges and was accused of accepting more than $700,000 in campaign-related cash and thousands of dollars in free hotel room and airfare. Now, 4 ladies of the evening also confirmed they had attended parties with Salman Melgen and Senator Bob Menendez in the Dominican Republic. There was also questions about the ages of the women, or girls, shall I say, that were involved in those parties as well. Unfortunately, the judge in that bribery trial had to declare a mistrial after jurors were unable to reach a verdict for more than a week. I don't know why they only had a week to do it, or why a week wasn't long enough, but it seems to me if the jurors in the case needed longer than a week to come to a verdict, they should have given it to them. Now, over the last 2 days, there have been two vicious attacks against President Trump coming from Nancy Pelosi. She attacked the president for being morbidly obese. That sounds like fat shaming to me. However, today she kind of walked it back a little bit and said that she was being sympathetic. I don't know how calling someone morbidly obese being anywhere near sympathetic, but on Monday she took this swipe at President Trump because apparently his age and his weight, and I'm sure that his admission that he's been taking HCQ to defend against the CV-19 had something to do with it as well. Now, President Trump did respond. He called Pelosi a sick woman. He said she's got a lot of problems, a lot of mental problems, and then she responded in kind by claiming that she was being sympathetic to what President Trump is going through as a gentleman. I guess. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense, though. You can't call somebody morbidly obese and fat shame them and then come back and say that it's sympathetic. This is the kind of thing that only the Democrats can get away with. If a Republican had said something like this, you can bet that it would be wall-to-wall news on every single channel. Now, this is often something I do hear from the left, trying to say that something is wrong with President Trump and that he's out of shape, but there is a very important point I wanted to make. Right here is a post that my buddy Monty sent over, and this person, C. Dubois, says, regarding Pelosi's comment about President Trump being morbidly obese, here is a fact. President Trump always wears an entire complement of bulletproof apparel under his regular clothes, giving him a thicker appearance. I heard from an insider that the number of times attempts have been made on his life are unprecedented. He's not only a patriotic warrior, he's brave beyond my understanding. And she's a drunken idiot. So yeah, Nancy Pelosi can take that comment and put it you-know-where. And finally, in another lashing out at President Trump, Mika Karen Brzezinski is not going to be outdone. She wants to speak to the manager of Twitter to get President Trump banned. Now, she is, of course, the co-host of Morning Joe with her husband, Psycho Joe Scarborough. And this whole thing came up because President Trump tweeted yet again about the mysteriously deleted Lori Klausutis, the former intern for Psycho Joe Scarborough. Remember, she was found no longer with us in Psycho Joe's office. She had apparently hit her head on the desk. That was what the medical examiner had said. It was ruled an accident, but shortly after that, Psycho Joe left Congress, and then he showed up again on MSNBC. She went on a Twitter tirade. She says, Twitter need to know why Trump is not banned. I will be reaching out to the head of Twitter about their policies being violated every day by President Trump. Hope my call is taken. To think having a private number to reach out to Jack. Twitter, where is your responsibility? Please retweet. Jack, please take my call today. Please stop allowing your platform policies to be abused by the day. It's called libel. And finally, at Jack, at what point is Twitter a part of this? Take down Trump's account. The world would be safer. Retweet if you agree. Now, there is not a tremendous amount of interaction with these tweets. I think that most people are ratioing her because everybody knows that Psycho Joe Scarborough has something to hide. And other reporters are getting in on the act. Also, Adrian Elrod says it continues to baffle us why Trump is allowed to remain on Twitter. Now, the triggering happened because President Trump once again brought the attention on Lori Klausutis. He said, Roger Stone has been treated very unfairly. How about that jury forewoman? Does anybody think that was fair? Disgraceful. Stay tuned. Fox News and guys like low-rating Psycho Joe Scarborough are allowed to walk the streets. Open cold case. Once again, President Trump calling attention to the fact that the only people who seem to pay for their crimes are the people who worked for him at some point in the past. Why is it that people like Psycho Joe Scarborough don't have to answer for their crimes? There is no actual investigation, and the family of Lori Klausutis gets absolutely no closure. President Trump, please continue to make this point. There will be no justice here in America until we all live under the same legal system. If you do the crime, you do the time. As President Trump put it so succinctly on Instagram, I hope you had fun investigating me. Now it's your turn. The tables are certainly turning against the Dems and the people in the last presidential administration. Every single day, it's a new revelation, and I look forward to what the future has in store for us. I think that's all I've got for you today. I want to thank everyone for joining me. As always, this has been Red Pill 78. I am the corruption detector, and this was your Red Pill News. Good luck, everyone, and God bless. Hey guys, one more thing. It's Red Pill. I just want to say thank you once again to everybody that has helped to support the channel. If you'd like to get involved, you can go ahead and check the show notes in the pinned comment and the description. There's always good information in there. I've got a couple of backup channels. I ask that you go ahead and subscribe to them because if anything does happen here, I will start publishing there. And if you want things like merchandise or anything else, there is a bunch of information that you can find right below this video. All right, guys, thank you very much, and I'll see you tomorrow.